Welcome to Rad Onc Smart Review RadBio edition. Today we're diving into some really essential calculations, looking at tumor control and kinetics.
That's right. We're basically scaling up from the microscopic cell survival stuff we talked about before.
Exactly. So if you're a resident getting ready for your boards, or really anyone just looking to nail down how we quantify radiation's effects on actual tumors, you are definitely in the right place.
We'll kick off with the, honestly, massive doses needed to wipe out billions of cells, and then we'll connect that idea right into tumor control probability, or TCP.
Right. And then after that, we'll pivot a bit to tumor growth dynamics. We'll look at how a tumor changing size, the diameter we measure, relates to the actual cell doublings happening underneath.
And also how things like cell loss, which is huge, can really affect its overall growth rate.
It's definitely a journey into the numbers behind what we do every day in radiation oncology. So if you went into medicine hoping to avoid math, well, surprise, here we are.
Yeah, happens to the best of us. But honestly, these concepts are worth grappling with.
Oh, absolutely. They really are foundational for understanding why we design treatments the way we do. And let's be real, they're definitely going to show up on your exams.
Guaranteed. Okay, so let's lay the groundwork.
Right, let's start by just quickly revisiting where we left off. In our last discussion, we figured out how to determine the surviving fraction of cells after a specific dose. We were really focused on the cellular level then.
We talked about the D0 value, remember? That's a measure of a cell's intrinsic radiosensitivity. Tells you the dose to get survival down to about 37% on the straight part of the curve.
And crucially for today, we touched on the D sub 10 value.
The D sub 10, that specific dose needed to kill 90% of a cell population, or, achieve 1 log kill, reduce the cell count by a factor of 10.
That specific idea, log kill, and the D sub 10 value, that's really going to be our workhorse concept for today.
It has to be, because here's the thing. A clinically detectable tumor, even a small one, say around a gram, maybe a cubic centimeter, it contains an unbelievable number of cells. We're talking like 10 to the power of 9. A billion cells.
A billion. It's staggering when you think about it that way.
It really is. And to actually cure that tumor with radiation, we need to eradicate, essentially, every single one of those clonogenic cells. The ones that can actually regrow the tumor.
Right. Not just damage them, but eliminate their ability to reproduce.
Exactly. So killing 99%, or even say 99.9%, it just isn't going to cut it.
Why not? Seems like a lot.
Because if you start with 10 to the 9 cells, a 99.9% kill, that's a 3-log kill, right? It still leaves 10 to the 6 cells. A million cells.
A million clonogenic cells. Definitely enough to cause a recurrence down the line.
Absolutely. And this is precisely why this log kill concept is so fundamental. We need multiple logs of kill to get that number down near 0.
Okay, so that leads us straight into our first big task today. Calculating the actual dose needed for a target level of cell kill.
Right. Let's just clarify that log kill scale a bit more. 1D sub 10 dose kills 90%, leaves 10% surviving. That's 1 log kill.
Okay.
To get a 99% kill, you need to kill 90% and then 90% of what's left. That takes 2 times the D sub 10 dose. That's your 2 log kill.
Got it. And 99.9% kill.
3 log kill. Requires 3 times the D sub 10 dose. You just keep going like that. Each extra log means multiplying the D sub 10 dose again.
All right, makes sense. Let's walk through a typical calculation, something you might actually see or need to think through.
Okay, let's do it.
Imagine we have a tumor. It contains 10 to the power of 8 clonogenic cells. That's what, 100 million?
Yep, 100 million.
And let's say for these specific tumor cells, their D sub 10 value is 4 gray.
Okay, D sub 10 is 4 gray.
The question is, what single dose of radiation would we need to deliver to reduce the number of surviving clonogens down to an average of just 1?
Okay, classic problem. Set. Figure out the required log kill.
Right. We start at 10 to the 8th cells.
And we want to get down to an average of 1 cell. We can think of 1 as 10 to the power of 0.
Okay. So the reduction factor is 10 to the 8th divided by 10 to the 0.
Which is just 10 to the 8th. So we need to achieve 8 logs of cell kill.
8 logs. Got it.
Second step. Calculate the total dose. We know 1 log kill takes 4 gray, right?
Right, that was given. D sub 10 is 4 gray.
So the total dose is simply the number of logs needed multiplied by the D sub 10.
So that's 8 logs times 4 gray per log.
Which equals 32 gray.
32 gray. Wow.
Yeah. A single dose of 32 gray. That's what it would theoretically take to knock that 100 million cell tumor down to an average of one survivor.
It really does put the doses we use into perspective. 32 gray in one go is, well, it's massive. We don't typically do that.
Exactly. And that highlights why we need fractionation, which is a whole other very important topic we'll get to.
Okay, but here's where it gets a bit more, let's say, nuanced. Real-world biology isn't quite so perfectly predictable, right?
Not at all. Radiation cell kill is inherently a random process. It's probabilistic. It follows what we call Poisson statistics.
Poisson statistics, right?
Yep.
And what does that mean practically?
It means that even if our calculation tells us a certain dose should leave an average of one surviving cell across, say, 100 identical tumors.
Yeah.
In reality, some of those tumors might, just by chance, end up with 0 surviving cells. That's a cure.
Okay.
But others might end up with 2 or 3 or maybe even more surviving cells. And those tumors will eventually recur.
So the average doesn't tell the whole story for an individual patient?
Precisely. It's like flipping a coin. Even if it's a fair coin, you won't get exactly 5 heads and 5 tails every 10 flips. There's random variation.
Which brings us to our second objective, tumor control probability, or TCP. How do we calculate the probability of cure?
There's a key formula for that. It links the average number of surviving clonogens, let's call that N, to the probability of cure, the TCP.
And that formula is?
TCP equals E raised to the power of negative N. So TCP equals E to the minus N.
Okay, TCP equals E to the minus N.
Yeah.
That exponential relationship is critical.
Absolutely. And you'll definitely want to remember some key benchmarks from this formula, especially for exams.
Okay, like what?
Well, if we aim for a dose that leaves an average of exactly one surviving cell per tumor, so N equals 1,
Yeah.
then the TCP is E to the power of negative 1, which is approximately 0.37 or 37%.
So TCD37 corresponds to N equals 1. That's a good anchor point.
It is. Now, what if we want a higher probability of cure, say 90% TCP or TCD90?
Okay, what does it need to be then?
For 90% TCP, we need to reduce the average survivor's N down to 0.1.
Wow, only 0.1 surviving cells on average.
Yep. And for 95% TCP, N needs to be 0.05.
Even smaller.
And for a 99% TCP, it has to be driven down to an average of just 0.01 surviving cells per tumor.
Incredible. It shows how much more killing power you need to get those last few percentage points of cure probability. The returns diminish fast.
They really do. You have to work incredibly hard, dose-wise, to push in that low.
Okay, let's try another calculation, maybe combine these ideas.
Sounds good. Let's integrate D0 and TCP.
All right. Let's say we have a tumor with 10 to the power of 9 clonogenic cells. A billion again.
Okay, 10 to the 9th.
And from its cell survival curve, we know the D0 is 2.5 gray.
D0 is 2.5 gray. Got it.
The question, what total dose is needed to achieve a 90% TCP?
Okay, a multi-stepper. Good one. First things first, we need the D sub 10. We have D0. How do we get D sub 10?
Ah, right. There was that conversion factor.
Yeah.
D sub 10 is about 2.3 times D0?
Exactly. Approximately 2.3 times D0. Remember that factor. It comes from the natural log of 10. It bridges the base E of D0 to the base 10 of log kill.
Okay, so D sub 10 equals 2.3 times 2.5 gray.
Which comes out to 5.75 gray. That's our dose for one log kill for these cells.
5.75 grays per log.
Yeah.
Okay, step 1 done. Now, what's the required log kill?
Well, we want a 90% TCP. And we just said that requires reducing the average surviving cells N down to 0.1.
Right, N equals 0.1, which is 10 to the power of negative 1.
And we started with 10 to the power of 9 cells.
So the reduction factor is 10 to the 9 divided by 10 to the minus 1.
Which equals 10 to the power of 10.
10 logs of kill required, that's a lot.
A huge amount. We need to reduce the population by a factor of 10 billion.
Okay, so final step. Calculate the total dose.
Easy now. Total dose is the number of logs needed times the D sub 10 per log.
So 10 logs multiplied by 5.75 gray per log.
Equals 57.5 gray.
57.5 gray. Again, a massive single dose theoretically needed for a high probability of control for a billion cell tumor.
It really drives home why our clinical doses, even when fractionated, add up to be so high, 60, 70, 80 gray sometimes. We're fighting against these enormous numbers.
Okay, great. We've tackled cell kill and control probability. Let's shift gears now to the other side of the coin. Tumor growth.
Tumor kinetics, yeah. How fast these things actually grow.
Clinically, when we measure a tumor, we usually talk about its diameter, right? Like on a ET or an MRI scan.
Sure, that's what we can easily measure.
But the growth itself, the actual increase in cell number, that's happening within the tumor's volume.
Absolutely. Volume is what holds the cells. Diameter is just a one-dimensional measurement of a three-dimensional object.
And understanding that relationship between diameter and volume, and therefore cell number, is really key. It's our next objective. Relating diameter changes to actual cell doublings. This trips people up all the time.
It really does. It's basic geometry. But we forget. Think of a sphere. Its volume is proportional to the radius cubed, right? 4/3 pi r cubed.
Right, or proportion to the diameter cubed, since diameter is just 2 times the radius.
Exactly. So volume goes up with the cube of the diameter. Now think about cell doubling. That means the number of cells doubles, so the volume doubles.
Okay.
But what does that do to the diameter? If the volume doubles, the diameter doesn't double. It increases by the cube root of 2, which is only about 1.26.
Okay. So a doubling in volume is only a small increase in diameter.
Right. Conversely, if you double the diameter, what happens to the volume?
Okay. If diameter doubles, volume increases by 2 cubed.
Which is 8. So doubling the diameter means an 8-fold increase in volume.
An 8-fold increase in volume means how many cell doublings?
Well, 2 to the power of what equals 8? 2 times 2 is 4, times 2 again is 8. So that's 3 doublings.
Wow. Okay. Doubling the diameter takes 3 cell doublings. That's crucial.
It is. Let's cement that with an example.
Good idea. Let's say we have a spherical tumor, and it grows from 1 centimeter in diameter to 4 centimeters in diameter.
Okay, 1 centimeter to 4 centimeters.
And let's assume, just for simplicity, no cell loss for now. How many cell doublings did that take?
All right, step by step. First, what's the increase in diameter?
It went from 1 to 4 centimeters, so the diameter increased by a factor of 4.
Okay, factor of 4, increase in diameter. Now, the critical step, what's the increase in volume?
Volume is proportional to diameter cubed, so the volume increased by 4 cubed.
And 4 cubed is 4 times 4 times 4.
16 times 4 is 64, a 64-fold increase in volume.
Exactly. Now, the final step, how many doublings does it take to get a 64-fold increase? We need to solve 2 to the power of x equals 64.
Okay, let's count up. 2 to the 1 is 2, 2 squared is 4, 2 cubed is 8.
Keep going.
2 to the 4th is 16, 2 to the 5th is 32, 2 to the 6th is 64.
There you go. 6 cell doublings.
So that tumor growing from 1 to 4 centimeters in diameter required 6 doublings of its cell population.
Precisely. And the common mistake is thinking, oh, diameter went up 4 times, maybe that's 2 doublings. No. Always cube the diameter change factor to get the volume change factor, and then figure out the doublings.
Got it. Cube the diameter change, then find the doublings. Super important takeaway.
Okay, now let's dig a bit deeper into the kinetics themselves. There are some key formulas we use to describe what's happening within that growing cell population.
Right, beyond just the overall size change. Our last objective is to really get comfortable applying these cell kinetic formulas.
First one, the mitotic index, or MI.
Mitotic index, what's that measuring?
It's basically a snapshot. It tells you the proportion or fraction of cells in a population that are visibly in mitosis at any given time.
Okay, the cell's actively dividing.
Exactly. The formula is MI equals lambda times T sub m divided by T sub c.
Okay, break that down. Lambda?
Lambda is a correction factor, often approximated as 0.693, the natural log of 2. It accounts for the fact that the population is growing exponentially.
Got it. T sub m.
That's the duration of mitosis itself, how long that M phase lasts.
And T sub c.
The total cell cycle time, the time it takes for a cell to go all the way around from one mitosis to the next.
So mitotic index reflects the ratio of mitosis duration to total cycle time, adjusted by lambda. Makes sense. A higher MI suggests more active proliferation.
Generally, yes. Now, similarly, there's the labeling index, or LI.
Labeling index, what's that?
This measures the proportion of cells that are in S phase, the DNA synthesis phase, at any given time.
Why labeling?
Because historically, you'd expose the cells to a radioactive DNA precursor, like cruciated thymidine, which would get incorporated or labeled only by cells actively synthesizing DNA in S phase.
Oh, okay. And the formula.
Very similar structure. Li equals lambda times T sub S divided by T sub C.
So same lambda, same T sub C, but now T sub S is the duration of the S phase.
Precisely. Both MI and LI give us valuable information about the proliferative state of the tumor.
Right, like maybe how sensitive it might be to cycle-specific drugs.
Exactly. Now, perhaps the most clinically relevant kinetic parameter, the cell loss factor, usually shown as the Greek letter phi,
Phi, cell loss factor. Why is this one so important?
because it explains a major paradox. Why do human tumors often grow so much slower in reality than you'd predict, just based on how fast their cells are dividing?
Because not all the new cells stick around.
Exactly. Phi represents the fraction of newly produced cells that are lost from the tumor. They might die through apoptosis or necrosis, or they might metastasize.
So it accounts for the inefficiency of tumor growth.
Perfectly put. The formula is
Right.
phi equals 1 minus, open parenthesis, teapot divided by TD, close parenthesis.
Okay, new terms here. Teapot.
Teapot is the potential doubling time. This is the theoretical time it would take for the tumor volume to double if there were absolutely zero cell loss. It's based on the cell cycle time and the fraction of cells actually dividing.
The ideal fastest possible doubling time.
Right. And TD.
TD must be the actual doubling time.
Exactly. TD is the observed volume doubling time, the time it actually takes for the tumor volume to double as measured clinically, accounting for all that cell loss. TD is almost always longer, often much longer than teapot.
Okay, so phi equals 1 minus teapot over TD. How can we remember which T goes where?
Good question. Here's a little mnemonic. The potential teapot doubling time is always potentially shorter, maybe too damn short compared to the observed time, TD. So teapot goes on top, TD on the bottom. Subtract that fraction teapot TD from 1 to find the fraction lost.
The potential is too damn short. Teapot over TD. I like it. Okay, let's try an example of that.
No, say a human tumor has a potential doubling time, teapot, of 30 days.
Okay, teapot is 30 days.
But when we measure it clinically, its observed volume doubling time, TD, is 120 days.
TD is 120 days, much longer. What's the cell loss factor, phi?
We just plug it into the formula. Phi equals 1 minus teapot divided by TD.
So phi equals 1 minus 30 divided by 120.
30 over 120 simplifies to 1/4, or 0.25.
So phi equals 1 minus 0.25.
Which equals 0.75, or 75%.
Wow. So for every 100 new cells made in that tumor, 75 are lost.
That's what it implies, a 75% cell loss factor. And that's actually pretty typical for many human tumors. It explains why a tumor whose cells might cycle every day or two can still take months to double in size. There's a huge amount of waste and inefficiency in tumor growth. #tag clinical pearls in decision-making.
Okay, these calculations, log killed, TCP, volume doubling, cell loss, they really are fundamental, aren't they? They explain so much about why we do what we do.
They absolutely are. They're the theoretical underpinning for fractionated radiotherapy, for dose selection, for understanding treatment response or lack thereof.
Like that TCP calculation, it just makes it crystal clear why we need such high total doses, 60, 70, 80 gray sometimes.
It's not arbitrary. It directly relates back to needing maybe 9, 10, 11, even 12 logs of cell kill to get that average surviving clonogen number down low enough for a high cure probability, starting from billions of cells.
And the kinetic stuff, teapot, TD, cell loss, that feels really clinically relevant too, especially when treatments get prolonged.
Oh, absolutely. Think about accelerated repopulation.
Right, that's a big one, especially in certain sites.
Definitely. Let's paint a picture. You're treating a head and neck squamous cell carcinoma patient. Standard fractionation, things seem to be going well, tumor's shrinking.
Yep.
But then maybe around week 4 or 5, you notice on exam, or maybe the patient reports, that the shrinkage has stalled. Or worse, it looks like it might even be growing a little bit again. What's going on there?
That's the classic time for accelerated repopulation to kick in, isn't it?
It is, particularly in squamous cell carcinomas, head and neck, cervix. These tumors can sometimes respond to the cell killing from the early weeks of radiation by signaling the surviving cells to divide faster.
So their teapot actually gets shorter during treatment.
Effectively, yes.
Yeah.
Or the growth fraction increases. The net result is the tumor starts repopulating more quickly, counteracting the cell kill from radiation.
And our understanding of teapot and TD helps us recognize this.
It does, and it informs what we do next. If we suspect accelerated repopulation, we know we need to counteract it.
How?
Well, we need to either finish the treatment course quickly, minimizing gaps, or consider altered fractionation schedules. Things like hyperfractionation, smaller doses twice a day, or accelerated regimens where the total dose is given over a shorter overall time.
To basically outrun the tumor's accelerated regrowth.
Exactly. Those clinical decisions are directly driven by applying these radiobiological principles of kinetics and repopulation. It's not just abstract math, it's strategy. Hashtag board blitz.
Okay, this has been great. Let's try to really lock this in with a quick board blitz style review. Ready?
Let's do it. Fire away.
Question 1. A tumor has 10 to the power of 10th clonogenic cells. Its D sub 10 is 3.0 gray. What total dose gives a 37% probability of cure? TCD 37. Is it A, 23G, B, 27GJ, C, 30GJ, or D, 33J?
Okay, TCD 37 means N equals 1 surviving cell. We start with 10 to the 10th. We need to get to 10 to the 0, which is 1. That's a 10 log reduction. D sub 10 is 3 gray per log. So 10 logs times 3 gray per log. That's 30 gray. Answer C.
Perfect. 30 gray. Question 2. A tumor's measured volume doubling time, TD, is 90 days. Its cell loss factor, phi, is 80% or 0.8. What's its potential doubling time, TPOT? Is it A, 12 days, B, 18 days, C, 45 days, or D, 72 days?
All right, got to use the formula. Phi equals 1 minus TPOT TD. We want TPOT. Rearranging gives TPOT equals TD times 1 minus phi. So TPOT equals 90 days times 1 minus 0.8. That's 90 times 0.2, which is 18 days. Answer B.
Excellent. 18 days. Question 3. A spherical metastasis grows from 0.5 centimeters diameter to 1.0 centimeters diameter. How many doublings of the cell population does this represent? A, 1, B, 2, C, 3, or D, 4?
Okay, diameter doubles from 0.5 to 1.0 centimeters. Factor of 2 increase in diameter, volume increases by diameter change cubed, so 2 cubed, which is 8. An 8-fold increase in volume or cell number means 2 to the power of 3 equals 8. So 3 doublings. Answer C.
Spot on. 3 doublings. Always remember the cube. Final question. A treatment aims for a 99% TCP. According to Poisson stats, what average number of surviving clonogens N must be achieved? A, 1.0, B, 0.1, C, 0.5, or D, 0.01?
99% TCP. We know TCP equals e to the minus n, so n equals negative natural log of TCP. Negative natural log of 0.99, that's a very small positive number, approximately 0.01. So n must be 0.01. Answer D.
Fantastic. 0.01, you nailed the blitz. Hashtag tag summary. So wrapping up today, we really went from the micro to the macro, scaling up our calculations from single cells right up to entire tumors. We looked at the huge doses needed for control and how growth kinetics play a critical role.
Yeah, we calculated the total dose for a target log kill using D sub 10. And we saw how tumor control probability forces us to drive that average number of surviving clonogens and down to incredibly low levels, well below 1, using that TCP equals e to the minus n formula.
We also hammered home that crucial point about tumor volume being proportional to the cube of the radius or diameter, essential for understanding doubling times from size changes.
Definitely. And finally, we use that cell loss factor formula phi equals 1 minus TPOT over TD to understand why tumors often grow much slower than their potential and how concepts like accelerated repopulation fit into that kinetic picture. These aren't just equations, they're the logic behind our treatment strategies. Hashtag outro.
For more practice, including complete practice oral boards, check out radonsmartlearn.com. That's RADONCSMARTLEARN.com. And be sure to subscribe to Rad Onc Smart Review for our next episode.
In our next session, RadBio P39C, titled Calculations 3, The Power of Fractionation, we'll really get into the core of why modern radiotherapy works the way it does. We'll be calculating and comparing biologically effective doses BEDs for different fractionation schemes.
Yeah, we'll finally bring in the alpha-beta ratio and see mathematically why splitting the dose into fractions is usually so beneficial.
This is where a lot of this theory really comes together clinically. It should be a great session.
Looking forward to it. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in.